People talk about modernity, human rights, and equality, justice, and democracy, but all these are lip service. Only way to consume the weapon is either to create a war or possibility of war or through the so-called terrorism.
Professor Samdhong Rinpoche, in your talk you mentioned that we live in a world of consumers and not of users. What does it mean?
That means we are not using the commodity due to our needs. We are just consuming the commodities out of our greed, and that greed has been exploited by the producers, and they decided what we need and how much we consume the things, they would be considered better human being. So therefore, use is always been based on the need, and consumption is based on the greed. So we are now living in a world of greed.
In ancient times there also was a little bit certainly this principle when it was about wars, about territory. Why is it so dangerous in these modern times now?
Because now all these things have become a commercial business venture. There are a lot of weapon industries, and the weapon industry is the most profitable industry. They always produce destructive weapons, and for those weapons they need always consumer, the consumer market. And to consume the weapon, only way to consume the weapon is either to create a war or possibility of war or through the so-called terrorism. That is the only way to consume. If there is a peace or there is an end of war, then the industry's production will not be have a continuity of their market. To have a continuity of their market, they need to consume the productions all the time. And for that, unending war, unending terrorism, and use of the weapons all the time. So therefore, it is a commercial business, so there's no purpose of winning or losing. It is only for the purpose of consuming the goods.
So you're saying that wars are also created to create markets. That's very...
Yes, that I have said. For example, certain wars which can be won very easily. I remember the Vietnam War in my lifetime, and it was dragged for about 19 years. And if they wish to win, that can be won within 24 hours. Or they wish to withdraw, they can do it within 24 hours. But for dragging the war on and on was not for the purpose of winning, not for the purpose of withdrawing, but only to consume the weaponry or the productions and to keep its market on. So that is very unfortunate things of today.
We have organizations like the United Nations, which should help in these issues. You mentioned that even in these organizations, it's more about rights. But as I understood, we have to look at our duties.
Yes.
Can you summarize for our audience what your point was about that?
United Nations is one of the organizations most undemocratic and totalitarian organization. I don't know why the humanity is accepting this kind of organization. For example, UN has almost 200 member nations. I think 192 member nations at present. But all the decisions are being taken by one nation. And yet all the other nations accept it. And this is one of the most dictatorial organization, and people talk about modernity, human rights, and equality, justice, and democracy, but all these are lip service. The biggest organization of the world, UNO, has no democracy, no equality, no justice, but we still maintain this. And on the contrary, they have a so-called Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And after declaration of that document, much human rights violation have been happened in the world. If China is violating human rights and Myanmar is violating human rights, no one has a courage to say something. And for the last 60 years, the most violation of human rights, unprecedented violation of human rights are taking place in the People's Republic of China. Not a single resolution was able to pass against them to condemn their human rights violation in the Human Rights Commission or Human Rights Council. All the time, you will look to the resolutions. They are all on the political basis, not on the reality basis. All the expert committees do recommend the resolution, but when it comes to the council or the committee, they are not able to pass any resolution. So this is the reality of the things of today.
You were former prime minister of the Tibetan community, so you really have an insight on this. But when you say so, me as a private person, I hear so many things similar like this on the news. What can I, as an individual, being part of this modern world, what can I do, like really very pragmatically, where should I start?
I think any individual should start to say whatever injustice is going on in the world. We shall have to have the courage to say it is wrong, it is injustice, whether it has an effect or not. But we shall have to dissociate ourselves with those injustice doers. And secondly, we try to create an awareness among the humanity what is right and what is wrong, not carried by only the conventions or only the big powers. And thirdly, we shall have to realize the importance of self-awareness. That means self-autonomy, and to think by oneself rationally, not to be influenced by the advertisements or by the big powers or by the media. So we have to protect our rational mind. That is most important for every individual. Any individual is able to protect his or her own rational mind and not to be carried away by the forces, then the individual will have something to contribute in the society, into the world.
And on society level, what would your first wish be? What should we ask our government or the people that represent us to do?
I think the first thing is to look after the younger generation, give a right education, not an indoctrination, really trying to awake the inner intelligence of the younger generation, not to impose anything upon them. They should not be considered as raw material, which is to be processed in accordance with the need of the corporations or governments. Each individual has its own potential, and that potential must be allowed to develop. And the second thing is to look after the poor people. There are a lot of poor people in every nation, and which have been neglected. So poor people has a right to be survive, right to food, right to clothes, and right to shelter. And the minimum needs of the poor people must be taken care of, instead of misusing the resources for the purpose of war or purpose of accumulating weapons and all these things. This too is the most important. Right education to the younger generation, and necessity for the necessities of the poor people, their health, their children's education, their shelter, their food, their clothes, that must be provided by the state. This is, I think, most important.
And my last question is aiming at the inner development. You were saying that meditation can be key to that. Many people here practice meditation or yoga, but I see it very often as a lifestyle thing in the Western world. What is the difference how you practice meditation, so that can help me to get a little bit in this direction?
Meditation is a difficult process. The so-called meditation or yoga which are practiced today is only for stress management or health management. It is not management of the mind. The management of mind meditation shall have to be combination of three things. The first is moral discipline, moral code, and people must live a right lifestyle. And if you don't have any moral discipline, your mind can never be meditative. First, you have to be observe a certain degree of physical and vocal discipline, and thereafter your meditation must be a training of mind, not the dulling of mind. It should not be oriented for stress or worry management. It should be the real developing the power of concentration and the power of analyzation. This is the real object of the meditation. And thereafter the wisdom, the praja, will awake automatically. If you have a shield, the first state, this moral discipline, and then you have samadhi, the concentrated mind, and then you will able to awake your inner wisdom. Inner wisdom cannot be put from outside. You have your own inner wisdom. You have to be try to awake that inner wisdom. That is the purpose of meditation. Unless and until you are able to awake the inner wisdom, just in as meditative posture, it will not help you much.